industry to clinical and scientific professionals. I am pleased to introduce you the ACMA Life Sciences Associate, Dr. Kiana Dixon, who is a pharmacist by training and subject matter expert on all things related to becoming board certified in medical affairs, as well as career opportunities in the pharma industry for those with scientific and clinical backgrounds. With that, I will turn it over to Kiana, who will briefly present an overview, which I think you'll find very helpful.
Thanks, Abby. So as Abby mentioned, I am Kiana Dixon, and as a pharmacist with the ACMA, the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs, my role as a life sciences associate specialist is to really provide information to not only ACMA, but also to interested professionals like you all here on this webinar today, about the life sciences industry and also about pharma. So again, thank you all for joining us today so we can discuss these multiple career options and the different many opportunities that are available to you in the pharmaceutical industry. My goal today is for us to really highlight those different roles in pharma, specifically in medical affairs, and we'll go over the difference. These career options that we're talking about today, they're suitable for many professionals with a clinical or a scientific background across the entire life sciences industry, including not only PharmDs and MDs, but also our nurses and our nurse practitioners. Again, anyone with a clinical background. I also wanted to mention before we start how we'll approach questions this afternoon. So I see some of you have already started in the Q&A section, but please ask your questions in the Q&A feature of Zoom. You'll see it at the bottom of your screen. Abby will be reviewing and noting your questions, and we'll address those at the end. All right, so let's just go ahead and get started, just with a quick overview. When in the pharma industry, you're working somewhere along the drug development in one of these departments within the pharmaceutical industry. Now, as an overview, again, the drug development process includes multiple organizations and multiple teams along this pipeline. And many aspects of this process is handled by the individual pharmaceutical company, whose goal is to create drugs for patients and get them approved by the regulatory agency in their region. For example, here in the US, a pharma company would need approval by the FDA. But if you're over in Europe, of course, you would need approval by the EMA, for example. First up, let's go ahead and go through these different career opportunities and these different teams throughout the pipeline. First up, we have the research or clinical development team. It says it in its name, right? Their role is to really develop and to drive the research of a new drug or product for the pharmaceutical company. And this team oversees all the clinical trials. Next up, we have medical affairs. The medical affairs team is probably one of the largest teams within a pharma company. If you look up what a medical affairs professional does, it'll tell you something about scientific patients, which is true. The functions of medical affairs are more broadly defined as data generation and data dissemination. And we'll actually highlight and dive into these specific functions next, those specific to medical affairs. Next up, we have regulatory affairs. So the goal of this team is to really provide strategy and guidance for other departments within the company when it comes to those guidelines that are set forth by regulatory agencies. I imagine regulatory affairs as a phone carrier, right? Because they manage the communications from the regulatory agency like the FDA or the EMA that we mentioned earlier on one end, and then on the other end, they have the pharma company. Next, health economics and outcomes research. This team combines clinical data and economic data to really gain insight into a medication's value to patients. We'll actually go into more details of this function later as well. And finally, we have marketing or commercial. This function also spans the drug's life cycle from the very beginning because this department has a heavy hand in building and tailoring the strategy of brand messaging of a drug and the entire pharmaceutical company. Now, so we went over those different departments within a pharmaceutical company, and this sums them all up. We mentioned how the details of each of these teams and departments and how they work together, but let's look at where specifically the medical affairs team sits, how it sits as a team, and also how it fits into that picture of building a strategy internally with these other teams here, R&D or research and development and commercial. The first being that we see medical affairs picture as sitting in the middle between R&D and commercial. But let's take a zoomed in focus, okay? And we're gonna look more into medical affairs. So how can we define medical affairs? Let's again think of how we saw medical affairs before, how it was sitting in the middle between different teams. Now let's imagine it more as a bridge, right? They're a bridge between the R&D team and the commercial team. And this is because the functions of medical affairs are data generation and data dissemination. The data that we get that's generated from R&D and those clinical trials are then disseminated to the medical community, including HCPs, but also to patients. And remember who we mentioned handles and tailors that brand messaging of a pharma company's product? Commercial, right? And that's why we see them as acting as that bridge. And the medical affairs role is constantly evolving. We're seeing that the exchanges we have with physicians and other healthcare providers are focusing on a higher scientific level when it comes to educating on disease states and those different treatment options. With the rise of technology, we are also seeing a rise of digital capabilities and different tools that are giving the pharmaceutical company those insights into what the healthcare system needs. And this strategy is largely handled by medical affairs. Now, we're going to take a look at the rise of medical affairs and how it relates specifically to scientific exchange in the medical community. Here, we can see the difference over time between PSRs or pharmaceutical sales reps, which was traditionally a function within sales and commercial, compared to MSLs or medical science liaisons, which is a function within medical affairs. Here you can see that when the first data point captured of MSLs employed, sales reps were on the rise. But with the increased need of that high level of scientific knowledge, we now see this switch occur. And that's because PSRs or pharmaceutical sales reps, they usually don't have any clinical background. They're very business focused and sales heavy. And when compared to MSLs or those medical science liaisons, who we'll also get into next, sales have that background of many of you here with some type of clinical knowledge, whether you're a pharmacist, a physician, or a PhD. All right, so when we're looking at this structure here, this slide shows the hierarchy of the medical team of a pharmaceutical company. But what I want to highlight is that medical affairs is an umbrella term because there are multiple sub-functions and teams within medical affairs. There's med info, medical communications. We also have those medical science liaisons that we mentioned earlier. And even this is not all inclusive. We'll actually go into each function of medical affairs next. All right. Now that we will start diving into those few details of each function of medical affairs, first up we have med info or medical information. Before taking a look at the description and the responsibilities of this role, you can actually see that I included little icons here on the screen as a hint to what this particular role does. So for med info, I have someone with a headset, and that's because I picture a call center. You know, they field and they answer questions that come in from different healthcare providers about their employers or about their pharmaceutical company's product. Just for a real life example, you know, let's say you work for a pharma company that just released a new vaccine. A physician wants to administer this vaccine to a patient, but the physician doesn't know if patients with other comorbidities should take this vaccine, right? So the physician then submits this question to the company that made the vaccine, your company, and who answers this question? Who has to research through clinical trial data to answer the question with expertise, with knowledge? Medical information team does this. So with that being said, you can see why these skills here are important in this role. You have to understand how to analyze evidence-based medicine, to correctly interpret that data, to interpret that clinical trial data. MedInfo, they also develop resources for other medical affairs functions that interact with the medical community. And so it's also important to highlight your writing skills if you're ever interested in this role. The average salary of med info professionals is around $70K. And these salary numbers you'll see, they're in US dollars. Moving to the next function up for discussion this afternoon, scientific or medical communications. Now, the icon I have here is a pen to paper because the focus on this role is medical writing. This team develops and they produce documents for the life sciences industry. And these documents that they produce, they can actually be developed in many different type of deliverables, like the traditional slide deck or the traditional PowerPoint. They can also deliver web pages and even blog posts. And the need for this role, it will always be there because documents, they can be tailored for their audience or even for the general population. So the skills required here is the ability to speak about science, the ability to speak about healthcare in layman's terms, if that's ever required. The average salary for these professionals is around 89,000 annually. I'd also point out that as a medical writer, you can choose what type of writing that you want to do. There are options for you to work as a contract or freelance, as well as working for a contract research organization. All right, so now to the most popular function within medical affairs. The medical science liaison is what is considered the field medical affairs team because, well, they're on the field. So what do we mean by on the field? They're out in the medical community and they're having these face-to-face conversations with the leaders and those decision makers in healthcare. These decision makers are what we call KOLs or key opinion leaders. Now you see the icon for this function shows two people across the table. And this is to show that this is a discussion between two people. MSLs, they're liaisons of medical information. So when medical science liaisons, they meet with these KOLs, they're participating in a scientific exchange, data on disease state information and on treatment options. Because you have to be able to hold a conversation on these healthcare decisions and educate on different life science topics, an MSL, they must not only be able to have that strong scientific acumen, but they also have to have strong business skills. And the annual salary in US dollars for medical science liaisons can range from 120 to about 200K. All right, so moving on to the next function, HEOR, or Health Economics and Outcomes Research. So their responsibility of this team is to answer the question, is this worth it, right? So the HEOR team, they help payers, they help the government, and also physicians and patients to make sound and educated decisions. And here we can equate decision-making to costs. And that's why you see the stack of change here as this functions icon. Now, how can HEOR answer the question of worth? How can we really assess the value of a medication over a product? Well, we have to not only think about how safe and efficacious the medication is, but we also have to look at costs because we care about money and we care about payments, right? So HEOR professionals, they combine that clinical data with economic data to really gain insight into a medication's value to the patient. HEOR, this role is pretty new, but it's rising because the value of this team is being highlighted right now. Where it sits in pharma companies, it can actually vary from organization to organization. Some HEOR teams, they'll sit in medical affairs, and others, they may sit in commercial or reimbursement. But the average salary here for HEOR, the annual salary ranges from 104 to 157. All right. Now we're with pharmacovigilance. So pharmacovigilance deals with safety. Anytime you hear PV, pharmacovigilance, equate it to safety. The PV team, they monitor the safety of a medication from the beginning stages and through to monitoring the drug in the real world population versus in a controlled setting that we usually see with clinical trials during phases 1 through 3. But because they're monitoring a medication from beginning and through post-marketing, this team can actually work directly with clinical and research and development, as well as working with marketing and commercial. Someone in this function, they have to understand the implications of risk versus benefit. They also must answer those questions, are the benefits outweighing the risks? The annual salary for someone in this function has a wide range, but the average is around 140. So now that we've gone through the different functions within medical affairs, now we're going to start answering that question, how do you get there? How do we land that role? And there are actually many options. So one being direct to industry. And direct to industry really means that wherever you are now, whether you're in school or in a non-pharma related role, you jump straight or directly into an industry role without any extra training. Another option we have are fellowships. Many pharmaceutical companies, they offer fellowships where you'll gain about 1 to 2 years of hands-on experience. And you'll gain this experience within a specific department at their organization, depending on your background and your degree. And finally, Another pathway into industry is extra training through board certification. So by becoming a board certified medical affairs specialist, when applying to these industry roles and medical affairs functions, hiring managers and directors, they'll see that you're an expert in the field and you took that initiative of becoming board certified. Now, we've gone over these multiple options. Because there are multiple options of getting into medical affairs and into pharma, let's now review these opportunities and also some of the challenges that might come with each of these routes so we can see which is best for you. To industry. So we mentioned what direct to industry is no extra training is required. You just go directly into industry. We're going over these opportunities that are available to you for those direct to industry roles. So these roles are usually available as internships or entry-level full-time roles, maybe in pharmacovigilance or med info, networking, and also leveraging your past experiences and your scientific knowledge in order to gain that role. Highlight your importance to the team. But if you're looking at ways to enter the industry for a higher pay, these roles can be challenging for you because they're offered at a lower pay than other roles that require that experience or that extra training. And because usually applicants to these direct roles, they have little to no experience, recruiters and hiring managers, they like to see tailored education to the medical affairs field, just so they know that you have at least been exposed to this role and you know what you're talking about. And so certifications, it's important to research that covers and expands the entire medical affairs department or the entire medical affairs team. So fellowships are actually another way to build your career in pharma. We mentioned that, some employers, they like to see that hands-on experience or just direct experience with pharma and medical affairs. Fellowships, they're a great way to get that experience. So here we're looking at these opportunities. They're open to many terminal degrees. These fellowships, they sometimes are tailored to PharmDs, PhDs, and MDs, but there are also other fellowships that are tailored to other terminal degrees as well. We mentioned how fellowships, they offer that hands-on experience, but while you're gaining that experience, you get that direct connection with the pharmaceutical company. So once you're in on a fellowship, you have networking skills, you're able to speak to those within the company and leverage your fellowship so you can land a full-time role after the fellowship is over. Again, if you're looking at ways to enter the industry for a higher pay, these roles can be challenging for you because they're offered at a lower pay, again, than other roles. And because usually applicants to these direct roles have little to no experience, we mentioned how recruiters and hiring managers, they want to see that tailored education. And so fellowships, they offer that lower pay, but you do get that hands-on experience. And finally, board certification. So as the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs, this is the area of pharma that we're most involved in. Becoming board certified in medical affairs really shows that you have taken the initiative, again, in understanding the industry, understanding how medical affairs teams work cross-functionally, but also in taking that driver's seat in your career and in your personal professional development. So there are multiple board certifications available, but again, let's highlight ACMA's BCMAS program because not only is ACMA an accredited organization, but the board certified medical affairs specialist program really provides you with not only training, but it also helps you to build your business acumen and soft skills, which are an absolute must have when working in medical affairs. We mentioned that when we went through those different functions within the team. So if you're interested in this program, let's go through this column here together on the left. You can enroll in the BCMS program if you have any of these requirements. So PharmD, MD, or PhD. If not, if you have at least 2 years of experience in the life sciences industry, you're eligible for the BCMS program as well. When enrolling into the BCMS program, you'll gain access to 20 e-modules, which are all available online to you. And this is important because you can work at the program at your own pace. So you can actively work on career development whenever you like and wherever you like as well. Alrighty, so we've gone over the different functions, we've gone over the different pathways into industry. How can you stand out? We see this highlight here that for each MSL opening, there are about 200 applicants on average. So how can you stand yourself apart from those other 199 applicants? So I've listed some tips here. The first being professional development. So enrolling yourself into leadership workshops, enrolling yourself into mentoring programs. Try and find a mentor that's already in the industry or in the role that you desire and speak to them and see how they broke out or what they recommend of how you can stand out in your application. Next up, speaking engagements. When we went through these different medical affairs functions, you heard me mention how scientific exchange is huge in medical affairs. If you're in medical affairs, you have to be a great speaker. So the only way you can do better is to practice all the time. Practice those speaking engagements. If there's an opportunity for you to speak up so you can enroll yourself into that speaking engagement. Next, we have writing samples. Again, you heard often in those functions that writing is important. So write yourself, become a freelancer or a contract for a pharmaceutical organization. Write some blog posts, post something so you can practice. Again, practice makes perfect. Same with the speaking engagements. And then finally, becoming board certified. Becoming board certified, again, shows from the outside looking in, you're an expert in this area. You're an expert in that function. And so you're able to exhibit that and show that in your applications. My hope today was really to shed some light on the options available to you, whether you're still in the graduate program, looking ahead, if you're looking for entry-level roles, or even if you're an experienced professional in your field and you're just exploring your options in pharma. Either way, I hope you gain some insight in the different opportunities and different avenues available to you. And with that, I'm sorry, Abby, I'll leave the screen up for a while. This is both Abby and I's contact information, and you can screenshot or write this information down while we go through the questions that came in during the webinar. So Abby, what questions do we have so far?
Thank you, Kiana, for sharing all the detailed information with us. So we do have a question from our audience. The first question is, I live in Europe and I am a pharmacist, but I want to work from home in medical affairs. What do you recommend?
Oh, that's perfect. I mentioned earlier how our board certification program, the BCMAS program, is available online, so you can work pace. What's also great about the BCMAS program, because you're in Europe, we actually have a BCMAS program that's tailored to your region. So you'll learn about the FDA, but you'll also go through those regulations pertinent to the EMA. So that's perfect for you. If you have any questions, again, reach out to Abby or I, and we can enroll you into that Europe version.
Next question is, do pharmacists need to be registered in USA to work in medical affairs in American company? They're the same way if working in pharmacy?
No, you do not have to be registered. As long as you have that Pharm D, and that's what the pharmaceutical company or whatever role you're in, they're looking for, the expertise, not if you're registered. You do not have to be a registered pharmacist with a state or take the NAPLEX in order to have a role within the pharma.
Next question is traveling generally required in the pharmaceutical industry?
Depends on the role. So we're seeing, especially after the pandemic, because of the pandemic, many of these roles are available from home. But if you're interested in becoming a medical science liaison, you're building those relationships, and with any relationship, that face-to-face conversation is best. So it depends on the company, and again, it depends on the role. And I would say that it would be half and half.
Next question is, I am a MD candidate, basically an international medical graduate. Can you please guide me on how to apply jobs with no experience in pharmacovigilance, as most of the companies require some experience in pharma?
I would recommend you enroll into internships. Internships. It's huge. They're usually not that long, just a few months, but you dedicate your time and you crack down and you're learning about that role throughout your internship. While you're going through that internship, leverage your connections, your supervisors, whoever is at that organization during your internship. Make sure you set meetings with them. Show them that you're interested in this role so that possibly after your internship is over, they can recommend you for a role.
Next question is, which of these roles would you suggest a retail pharmacist apply to?
Any of them. Honestly, any of them. I'm biased because I'm a pharmacist. I'm a pharmacist advocate, but if you're a retail pharmacist, what I tell anyone who's in retail looking to break into pharma, you're actually one of those perfect candidates. When you're in retail pharmacy, you're very quick to switch from, speaking to a patient in layman's terms about their cholesterol medication and the side effects of it to where they can understand. But then you also have to turn around really quick, maybe 2 minutes later, and pick up the phone and then speak to a physician about hyperlipidemia using those tough drug names. So you're able to switch from layman's terms to highly scientific conversations really quick. And that's important in medical.
Last question is, after receipt of the BCMAS, do you need to do Cs or take the exam again to continue the credentials?
Yes. So with the BCMS program, as with any other board certification, there's a renewal process in order to keep up with the evolving landscape in the industry. And so the BCMS program recertification occurs every 5 years.
Thank you, Kiana, for answering all the questions, and thank you everyone for joining us. This is the end of our webinar. If you have any question, please do not hesitate to contact me and Kiana. Have a great day.
Thank you, Abby.